So thanks for joining me today. I am Jacob Pegg, the product manager at SalesPad. We are going to take a look at SalesPad Cloud and do a little bit more of an in-depth demo of Cloud. Kind of show you some of the features of the product, how it works, and then as you guys are watching this, there's a message box or a question box in the GoToWebinar menu, typically it's on the right-hand side. So go ahead and submit your questions there, and we'll have Q&A time at the end to go through and answer those questions. So let's go ahead and jump in. So we're going to take a look at SalesPad Cloud. So SalesPad Cloud is an operational ERP system. So we essentially take over your day-to-day operations, or you take your day-to-day users and move them into our system using QuickBooks Online for essentially the general ledger and the accounts payable side of your business. So everything else we're going to take over and handle within SalesPad. So managing your customers, managing your sales transactions, managing your inventory, that's the big one. So your inventory items, managing your vendors, your purchasing, receiving, assemblies, inventory adjustments. That functionality will all happen within SalesPad. And then like I said, so we pass over transactions to QuickBooks, essentially using QuickBooks as your general ledger, with SalesPad being your inventory subledger. So on the screen, we have the sign-in page. Of course, this defaults to my username and password. Again, your username is typically your email address. And there's a couple different ways that you can sign up. So if you go to cloud.salespad.net, you can sign up that way. It'll take you to this screen, and you can click here on the right-hand side and go through the sign-up process. You can also sign in with your Intuit account, which will automatically create a company for you, an organization and company for you. Or you can go through the apps marketplace through your QuickBooks company, your QuickBooks Online company. And log in that way, find our app in that marketplace, and go ahead and create an account there. So we do offer a free 30-day trial. So if you wanted to just play around with it, you could go sign up for a free trial of QuickBooks Online, and then also sign up for a free trial of SalesPad Cloud. Both you would get for 30 days. And so that gives you time to play around with it and see how it all works and how they work together. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and sign in. There is an onboarding process that it'll walk you through. One is you'll have to create an organization. So we have an organization. Within that organization, we would have one or more companies. And so you'll see that when I log in, there'll be a number of organizations and companies that I have listed here. And then I'm going to use my Jacob organization and my Peg Leg Cigar company. So once you've gone through that onboarding process, you'll end up at a screen like this. And this is our dashboard. And so there's some walkthrough or some information here on the top left that you can see that'll walk you through a number of different things. You may also get a pop-up message that hires the entire screen that asks you to go take a look at our setup guide, essentially. So it'll take you back to our website, and there's a getting started guide that can walk you through setting everything up within SalesPad. I highly recommend that you go through that, especially if this is your first time working with SalesPad Cloud. But you can see here that we have our different integrations. We have a number of different things. The graphs there, the pie charts, are showing the number of transactions that you have created for adjustments, purchases, receipts, and sales. And again, they're broken down across the transaction types. So again, a little bit of some reporting or dashboard information there, and then our integrations below. So I'll quickly cover the integrations that we have. So obviously our first one is Intuit QuickBooks, QuickBooks Online. So we do only support integration to QuickBooks Online. We don't work with any of the QuickBooks desktop products. We do have a couple of different options though. So as far as if you are currently a QuickBooks Enterprise customer, the Enterprise functionality typically aligns really well with the functionality that we offer. Those types of customers are really the ones that we are looking at. And so Intuit offers a migration tool to go from Enterprise to QuickBooks Online. So from within Enterprise, you can kick off that integration. Once that is done, we also have a tool that we run inside or in-house that we can take your Enterprise file, run it through our integration process that then brings over and picks up those additional data elements that may not exist or may not match up over on the QBO side. So we'll pick those up, things like classes, customer classes, price levels, some of those different things that just don't exist or don't match up on the QBO side. We'll import those from your enterprise file into SalesPad Cloud, and so that way you don't have to duplicate that setup or do other types of data imports. So that's the QuickBooks integration. We also offer Shopify for e-commerce, for another sales channel, managing sales channels. And so we have a two-way integration with Shopify. We handle doing, so importing sales transactions, importing items from Shopify. We will also push items up to Shopify, as well as we will push inventory quantities to Shopify. And so again, primarily though, we're looking at pulling down transactions and customers from Shopify as you take orders through your Shopify website. And again, being able to process those through SalesPad, the inventories in SalesPad, so, and then those posted transactions will go over to QuickBooks Online. So again, SalesPad becomes that single source of management for all of that information. And then we also integrate with ShipStation. ShipStation will handle all of our shipping solutions, or shipping software will be our shipping software. So any of those parcel carriers, so UPS, FedEx, Stamps.com, which handles the USPS, those are all handled through the ShipStation side. And so again, we have a two-way integration with ShipStation. We pass sales documents to ShipStation, and then they send us the shipping information back, as well as the freight or the shipping rate back from their the actual shipment back into SalesPad. And again, on post, all of that goes over to QuickBooks Online. So if you have any of those or any questions about any of those integrations, let me cover PayFabric as well. So PayFabric handles our credit card processing. So again, most of the credit card processing that is being done directly within SalesPad Cloud is primarily card not present transactions. Again, the idea is that we are looking at a wholesale distribution company, B2B type company. And so we're handling credit card transactions over the phone, typically over the phone, or given directly to a sales rep, and so they're keyed in. So again, card not present transactions. PayFabric handles a number of different credit card gateways, all processed through PayFabric. By using PayFabric, this takes SalesPad Cloud completely out of scope for PCI compliance, because we are never handling the credit card information directly within SalesPad Cloud. It's all done within PayFabric. So again, it really helps when interacting with customers on the PCI compliance side. Also, I just wanted to reiterate, if there's any questions about any of those integrations, go ahead and make sure you post them there in the GoToWebinars question box, and I'll follow up on those at the end of the demonstration. So let's take a look at navigation, just some of the basic navigation within SalesPad so that you guys can figure out how to move around. So again, we're going to take a look at customers. Everything that we see within SalesPad typically is grid-based. Any of our search screens are grid-based, and so this is one of our grids. This is the customer search screen. And so we have these columns. I also have an auto filter row drop down. You'll notice the little three dots when clicked on, those drop down the auto filter row. And then I can filter my data out. In this case, I already have one that filters out customers that are in California. I can clear the filter out. I can also go under the columns and clear auto filters there, as well as add any additional columns that are in our data set. And again, there's a number of them. By changing around these columns, adding these filters, this is only specific to your instance of SalesPad or of SalesPad Cloud. So if you add columns to your grid, it's not going to affect any of your other users. So each user gets to customize how they are looking at their data. Again, there's multiple different ways to sort. You'll see on the customer, next to the customer field, there's a triangle pointing up. If I click it again, it's now pointing down, showing that it's sorting in descending order. And if I hold the shift key down, I can now also sort by state. So again, now I'm sorting customer alphabetical within state. So customer in descending order, state in descending order as well. So again, there's multiple different ways that you can modify your grid and look at that data. This grid does support being exported to Excel. And so by using the export option, we can kick that information out to Excel and then manipulate it further there. Any of our search screens are going to use this same grid style interaction. So if we look at sales transactions, we see the same type of setup. We saw all of my sales transactions. I can hide posted and voided, which we'll talk about here shortly. I can hide certain transactions, and then again, so I'm now only seeing, these are historical orders, open invoices, open returns. And again, I have the columns grid. I can add additional columns to the screen. Inventory is another big one. So this is one that we really want to take a look at because this gives you a lot of useful information specifically around your inventory quantities. So in a lot of other competitive systems or competitor systems, to get this information, you have to go run some report. So I want to go see what of this item I have on hand for a specific location. Within SalesPad, we want to show you that information as quickly as possible, as easily as possible, without you having to go run a report. So again, it makes it real time as far as how I'm seeing this information. If I want to filter this down to a specific location, so we do support multiple locations, we support multiple bins within each one of those locations, but I can filter this grid down to, I only want to see inventory in my Lowell warehouse. And so then by selecting that, the Lowell warehouse out of my drop down, I now have quantities specific to that location. So again, I'm not running a report, I'm just modifying how I see the data on my screen. So because inventory is a very key part of what we do, managing that inventory, so let's spend some time here on this screen to take a look at some of the information that we display. First thing I see is my on-hand quantity. So I have my own hand, I have allocated. So for allocated, whenever we enter a sales order or a sales invoice or an inventory site transfer or an inventory out adjustment or create an assembly transaction, we are going to allocate inventory. And so that is essentially reserving that inventory for that transaction. And that reduces our available quantity. So the quantity is still on hand. It is still physically in our warehouse. But we've reserved that inventory for that item, and now I can quickly see what I truly have available that's not currently sitting on a transaction. So we have our allocation. We also have fulfillment. We'll talk about that on a sales transaction. And there's multiple different ways that we can handle fulfillment. But I mentioned earlier the posting process. So we have inventory will stay in the on-hand column until I post that transaction. So if this is on a sales order, I have to transfer that order to an invoice, and then I post that invoice. And the posting process, while foreign to what happens in QuickBooks Online, that's essentially telling, or the user's telling the system, I am done with the transaction in SalesPad. I am now ready to, essentially I've shipped this product to the customer. I've pulled that product out of my inventory. I have completed my assembly of that finished good. So that post is what actually pushes the transactions to QuickBooks and affects your financial records. That's also the process of removing any on-hand inventory at that time. So if I post an inventory out adjustment, I am going to remove that quantity out of my on-hand column for that location that I've specified on the adjustment. And then I'm going to see a journal entry in QuickBooks Online. That journal entry is going to be, again, this is an out adjustment, so I'm going to be crediting my inventory, and I'm going to be debiting a inventory variance account. So again, there's a number of different reasons that, or different times that you're going to have to post a transaction to see that on-hand quantity reflected based off of what you're doing. So another one is we'll see the on-hand quantity increased when we post a PO receipt. And then what we see on the QuickBooks Online side is we see a vendor bill that's created that has a debit to our inventory and a credit to our accounts payable account. So again, that posting process is the process of telling the system, I'm done, I'm now ready to affect my general ledger. Essentially, that means we're ready to go to QuickBooks. So if we go look at an item, actually we have a list of item types here. So there's multiple different item types that we support in SalesPad. So typically it's the same thing that you see over on the QuickBooks side. So I have my inventory items, I have my non-inventory items, I have service items, I have other charge items. We also support bundles. So if we look at this bundle, and again, this is my cigar store. So I have a cigar bundle that has a number of components that make up this bundle. And so in this case, I have two different items, quantity of 5 eaches that make up this bundle. This bundle, I don't track inventory records or cost records for this cigar bundle. My cost is associated to the components. And so while I might show, or we will show available quantity for that bundle, it is based off of the number of components, or the sum of the components that I can, how many of those bundles can I create and actually sell. You'll notice there's no on-hand quantity and no allocated quantity. Bundle items have no corresponding cost record, therefore there's no on-hand quantity of those items. So one of the other item types that's a little bit different and doesn't exist in QuickBooks Online is a pre-assembled bundle. And a pre-assembled bundle is different than a bundle in the fact that for it to get inventory in the system, I typically push it through an assembly process. And again, I'm posting that assembly process. So once that assembly has been posted, I now have created inventory cost records in the system within SalesPad Cloud. And so then we do have on-hand quantity. We do have allocation of fulfillment that happens of the pre-assembled bundle itself. So again, we can use assemblies. If I go look at this item, the setup for this item is essentially the same as setting up a bundle. But this is set up as a pre-assembled bundle. I have a number of different items with different quantities and unit of measure that go into making this item. But it's different in that I have to go to this assembly process and build this assembly. So if I look at one that I have created here, I then specify this is the assemble item that I'm building, how many of those that I am building, the location to pull my inventory out of, the location to put my finished inventory into, and I see my components on the screen and what I'm pulling out of each one of those components and where I'm pulling it from. Now in this case, I don't have enough of the first item, so you'll see a quantity allocated and quantity fulfilled is 0. But again, so I can add these to my document or to my assembly. Once I have my inventory there, I can then go post this transaction again, assuming I have enough quantity of those items to post. But I then go post this transaction. And again, now I'll end up with two journal entries on the QuickBooks side. I have an inventory adjustment out, so a journal entry adjusting this inventory out. So these items will come out, so they'll credit my inventory account, debit my inventory assembly variance account, and then I'll create an inventory adjustment essentially with a journal entry that goes in. So I'm adjusting in this inventory. So I'll see a journal entry that has a debit to inventory for the value of this item and a credit against that same inventory assembly variance account. So technically my assembly variance account should always net out to 0 because I'm hitting it on both sides. The cost of this assembled item comes from the rolled up cost of my components. So we're going to take the unit cost times the quantity for each of these items. That becomes the quantity, the summed cost, or the total, or the extent, or the unit cost for the new item that I am creating. So again, it's a rolled up cost. I can also add in a component for labor if I wanted to track a additional labor item or some. So it takes me X amount of time at this rate to build out this item. So again, if you have questions about assemblies, about the inventory and the item types, go ahead and post those in your question box, and we'll get to those here at the end. So now that we've taken a look at some of the items, one of the other things I want to talk, since we're looking at inventory, and again, one of the things that typically sets us apart from our competitors, we do support true unit of measure conversions. So if we go to our grid or our gear, I have my unit of measures, I have my eaches. Again, I have some here that are not used, but I have my eaches, and within that each, I have multiple different unit of measures. So I have my unit of measure type, and then I have individual unit of measures that exist within those types. So the first one, my unit of measure type is an each, and within the each, I can define what my base unit of measure is. So in this case, this is my each base unit of measure. I can specify a selling unit of measure. I'm selling these cigars in eaches, but maybe I purchase these cigars in a 25 count box. And so that defines what my unit of measure looks like. Then my unit of measure details outlines the conversion factor of each unit of measure to my base. So in this case, each is my base, it's a 1. But then if I look at my 25 count box, so this is a conversion of 25 to 1. So there are 25 eaches in one 25 count box. And so again, whenever we have an inventory transaction where we use a unit of measure other than each, we essentially stamp that line with a conversion factor. So this conversion factor shows on that line or is on the line, so we can always, or the system can always convert that quantity in that unit of measure back to the base. Inventory is always stored in your base unit of measure. So whatever items have each as their base unit, or whatever base unit of measure is set up for an item, we'll see that abbreviated within our screen. So that's how the EA or why EA is showing up in all of these different quantities. So if I look at any of these items, if I go take a look at this lighter, and we look at the unit of measure associated, or unit of measure type associated to this item, we can see that it is an each unit of measure with a selling unit of measure for this and a purchase unit of measure. So again, by setting the unit of measure type, I am rolling down my defaults to my item for the selling and purchasing, but I can always go change them on a part by part or item by item basis. So maybe this is a 10 count box instead of a 25 count box. So that's how you can have multiple different purchasing unit of measures within your item setup. So now that we've looked at our inventory, let's take a few minutes and look at how we get inventory into the system. So we have our items all set up. Again, there's multiple different ways to get our items into the system. We can pull them down from QuickBooks. We can import those items. Again, if I go to my inventory search, I have the import option here. So I can import that information, or I can do purchases and receiving, or I can do inventory adjustments to get that inventory into the system. So again, we are managing your vendors within SalesPad. One of the things we do with our lists, which again are different from some of our competitors, is that we maintain your lists independent of QBO until you have a transaction against that item or against that vendor or against that customer. So what that means is I can have a complete list of vendors in my SalesPad Cloud system, and those vendors may not show up in QBO until I actually purchase from that vendor and then I receive that PO. So just by cutting a PO does not push the vendor to QBO. It's only once I receive against that against that vendor is when we push a transaction, so in this case a vendor bill, to QBO, and it's at that point that the vendor has to be there. And so we're only pushing true financial data over to QBO, or lists based off of that financial data over to QBO. So items are the same way. We can have an entire list of items until I bring inventory in for that item through a receipt, through an inventory transaction. However I'm bringing inventory in, it's not going to exist in QBO until I actually receive it or sell it or adjust it in. Customer is the same as a vendor. So customer is not going to show up in QBO until I actually sell product to that customer. So I have a sales transaction and I post that transaction, being it a sales receipt or sales invoice. So again, you can have an entire list of prospects in SalesPad that never go over to QBO. So we try to keep your QBO data as lean as possible, only based off of, or only using that critical transactional information that we're sending over. So within your vendor, and again, we have these cards. We saw the inventory card. I have a customer card. I also have a vendor card. I can go look at my vendor card. I can see any active POs that are in the system. I can see contacts because we store multiple contacts for each one of so vendors and customers. I can see all purchase orders. So active are only showing ones that are not fully received. The purchase orders tab will show all of them. I can see specific items I've purchased. I can see receipts that I've created. In this case, I probably have a few that I've created for this customer, or for this vendor, excuse me. And again, we have notes, we have items, so I can create my vendor items, giving them a separate item number than how we track them in our system. And then we have interactions, and interactions are that CRM functionality that we talk about with SalesPad Cloud. So again, we're tracking those customers, we track those vendors. On a sales transaction, on a purchase order, we have the ability to tag interactions. So anytime that a user is interacting with a vendor, with a customer, specifically about a PO or specifically about a sales transaction, they can track that interaction, which is a named and time and date stamped note about that business object that they're talking about. So be it the customer, be it the vendor, so forth. So we have our vendors. We can, from the vendor, go ahead and create a PO. So that's one way that we can get the inventory into the system. So I can, in this case, I support standard POs. From the PO side, then I can generate a receipt. I've got a receipt here in the system already. And so then I can post this receipt. So this shows all of my items. Again, I can, because I support true unit of measure conversions, I can see the unit of measure here and the quantity, and then we blow out that unit cost based off, or we do the math based off of that unit of measure conversion. One thing I will mention back on the vendor card under the items tab you can set a unit cost specific to that item and that vendor and that unit of measure. So again, it gives you essentially vendor specific costing. So I can post my receipt, that pushes my vendor bill over to QuickBooks Online, and then puts my inventory into my system for this item. Now, this purchase order number looks a little bit different. So anything that begins with a DS is for a drop ship. So we also support drop ship POs. So again, we have our standard purchase orders and we have our drop ship purchase orders within the system. So we'll jump back over to the customer side. So I'm going to use my Cool Cars customer. And so again, we have the same type of information that we saw on the vendor. We have sales transactions, we have the contacts, we have the item sales, notes. We have the PayFabric wallet. So with the PayFabric wallet, this allows us to, and again, this is only visible if I have the PayFabric integration set up, but this allows me to store multiple credit cards for this customer in PayFabric, which are then available for to be used on my transactions. And so again, I can add those cards through this customer wallet. And again, this is not stored in SalesPad Cloud. This is all stored within PayFabric. Again, removing SalesPad from that scope for PCI compliance. From the Cool Cars customer, I can then create a transaction type or a sales transaction. So I have multiple different transactions set up. I'm going to use my order, but we support quotes or estimates, orders, invoices, returns, sales receipts, and refund receipts. And again, there's different scenarios that dictate when we use what. In this case, I've created a sales order. We pull in information from that customer by default. So we pull in billing address, shipping address. I can change that information on the fly. So if that customer has multiple addresses, I can select those different addresses off of that customer without having to retype any of that information. And so all of that comes over for me. I don't have to then go look something up or look it up somewhere else or open up another tab. It's all there, part of the screen for me. We have our header level fields on the sales transaction. We also have our shipping methods. In this case, I also have a number of UPS shipping methods set up. So whenever I have my ShipStation integration set up, we're going to pull over shipping methods and automatically add shipping methods to the system based off of the carriers that you have set up within ShipStation. In this case, I have UPS set up, and so we pull over all the UPS shipping methods available to us through ShipStation. Now, in ShipStation, you can turn off like these internationals if you're not doing international shipping, like UPS Ground International, if it doesn't make sense or if you're not using it. To help keep that list clean, you would do that on the ShipStation side. You can also, in SalesPad, go and mark those as inactive so they don't show in the drop-down list. In this case, I didn't have a payment term set for this customer. I will mention that if I do use payment terms, I can default it on the customer. In this case, I'm 2% 10 net 30. One of the things that we take over for your users and to make it easier for the QuickBooks side, and again, people are used to it on the desktop side, but automatically applying terms discounts. So a lot of times, or on the desktop version, QuickBooks does that for you automatically. So if I go to apply a payment and that's inside of my terms discount period, then it automatically applies a discount for me. Whereas QuickBooks Online, while it supports payment terms, it does not automatically support auto-applying those discounts. We've essentially moved that AR functionality into SalesPad. So we want you to process your AR. So I want to do cash receipts or I'm going to do payments directly within SalesPad. And as long as you are applying those payments through SalesPad against a posted invoice, we will automatically apply the payment terms discount if you're paying inside of the discount date. So we do support payment terms, and again, we see it used all the time, especially in that wholesale distribution environment. So I have my 2% 10 net 30. So again, I can finish out my header if there's additional information there, and now I'm ready to start adding my lines. And so again, one of the things I mentioned with the inventory lookup is that we want to give the user as much information as they can while they're keying in this, or while they are keying in this order. So the idea is that if your user is, so this is a sales rep or this is a customer service rep, keying the transaction in, sitting on the phone with the customer, they can quickly tell them, yes, I have that item, no, I do not. I have this much of it, or I don't have it at all, and it's not on purchase or it's not on order. I'll have to get it. So again, there's multiple pieces of information that we can quickly give them, So first thing is when I go to look up an item, as I start typing, it's going to filter that information down for me. Once I have an item that I've added to the document, it's going to show that item. It's going to pull in my price. In this case, you'll see I get a message at the top. This customer does not, or this item does not have a price level wholesale price set up. And so then it just defaults to my list price. It pulls in my estimated unit cost, and in this case, extended cost. And then I see some other information here. So again, these are additional columns. I can add and remove columns. I can pull that information off. I'm going to add one other item real quick. So I want one that is going to be back ordered. So if I go through and I look for an item that has 0 quantity available, and if I don't have any, I can always make that up. I can manually back order line. But in this case, you'll notice that once it's added, the text turns red on the line, and I get this red exclamation point. Again, this is to give the user the information immediately. I don't have any of this item on hand, so we're automatically going to back order it for you. So I also have these I's, the letter I here. These are our info panes on the far right hand side. So if we look at the one that's in stock, again, I can see that's already fulfilled. I can see my margin on this line item. So again, this is specific to this line item, whereas this up here at the top is specific to the entire sales document. I can also see quantities. I can see my vendor who I typically order this from, and then I can see my lead time to replenish this item. For my back ordered item, I can do the same thing, and I get a little bit different information. One is the box is red because it's back ordered. I can see my margin for this line at my cost that it came in at. I see I have no quantity, but I do have 5 on PO, or on an existing PO. So again, now I can tell my user or my customer, I've got 5 coming in. Maybe I can go ahead and tie that item to my purchase order. In this case, I don't have a default vendor set, so that's why I see the dashes for my vendor name and lead time. But if I did, I would see the vendor and I would see the lead time that I've specified in setting up my vendor item. So I saw that I had 5 of this item on a PO. So I can go ahead and check my box next to that line item. And there's a couple of things I can do. One is I can go out and generate a new purchase order directly off the sales document for this item. I can also go click link selected, find my item, and this is going to show me if I actually have any available that I can add from that PO to this sales document. So we create a sales line to purchase line commitment, and so then I can see that this PO does not have any linked to a sales document right now, and so I can go ahead and create this link and save that. And so now instead of me generating a new purchase order, I have now tied this sales line to the existing purchase order. Once it is received, that quantity of 1 is automatically committed to this sales document. So on receipt, it'll automatically allocate and fulfill to this sales document. And so now I have taken care of reserving that inventory through that, we call it the SOP to POP link. So through that SOP to POP link, we've reserved the inventory to this sales transaction. If I had purchased this independently, so I click the purchase selected button, it would have also created that SOP to POP link. It would have just created a new purchase order that I would have had to send over to my vendor then at that point. Once I have completed my sales document, I have some other options of what to do to process this document. One is I can take payments. So again, I can do a manual transaction, which is where I would do cash or check if I was just manually adding that information. If I have a standalone credit card terminal, I can do that through the manual option as well. But then I also have my PayFabric integration, so I could then go out and charge a credit card. I could do a pre-auth. I can do a deposit, and so that deposit automatically hits QBO immediately. So that's one option. Another option is, and again, this is something that really sets us apart on the SalesPad side, is you could use our workflow. And so we have a rules-based, action-driven workflow within our system. So I've got my sales workflow extended over on the left-hand side, and I can see the different batches that I have set up and the documents and document totals within each of those batches for my order document type. Workflow for us, that represents a step in your business process. And so we create batches, and that batch represents each of those steps, or I name a batch based off of each of those steps. And so we have a very basic one here. I have sales documents, that's where I create, that's the starting batch or the starting point in my workflow. All new documents start in the sales documents batch. From there, I move to the warehouse. So when I release or push a document out into the workflow, it moves to the warehouse, unless there's back order quantity on the document. And in that case, when I release the document, I have a rule that looks at all the lines on my sales document. If it finds any line that has a backorder quantity, it's going to move the document into the backorder queue. In this case, it's not going to go to the warehouse queue then. So, and that's where my picking and packing and shipping team, or my warehouse team, is working out of. So therefore, nothing happens, no warehouse activity happens until that item has been purchased and received. And then I have my ready to invoice batch. And so that's where, once my warehouse is done with a document, so again, if I'm using something like ShipStation, ShipStation will automatically forward that document in my workflow for me, or a user can go through the warehouse batch and manually or batch forward those documents to the ready to invoice. So again, with that workflow, that tells my back office users that, or my office users, that I have this many documents, in this case 5, that are ready to be transferred to an invoice. So typically end of day, first of the next day, a user is going to go in and batch transfer all of those orders in the ready to invoice queue over to an invoice, which has its own workflow. They will then print or email those invoices out to their customers, and then they'll batch post those transactions, which sends all of those transactions over to QuickBooks Online, and again, affects my financials, reduces my inventory quantity, and so forth. So again, it is a different process. Typically people have, or companies have, those types of processes in place already. We're just giving them a way for the system to actually utilize those same processes. Workflow is user definable by each SalesPad user or SalesPad company. So if I go into my workflow setup screen and I go under my sales workflow and I'm going to look at my order workflow, I can see all of my batches that I've defined. And then from here, I can also set up my rules. And so in this case, I have a rule. This is my back orders rule that I mentioned before. So if I have any, and I didn't have it fully set up, but if I have back order quantity on any lines on the sales document, in this case, I wanted to do 2 actions. The end action is I wanted to change the workflow batch. The first action, though, is I wanted to split the document. Splitting is also something a little different that our competitors don't have. So splitting allows us to take a document based off of certain criteria, and I'm going to drill into my split rule so that you can see those criteria. So based off of one or more of these split options, I'm going to split this document into 1 or more documents. So a split document uses the same document number. It just gets a .1, .2, .3, and so forth appended to the end of the document number, so that we know what the base document was, and then how many times it's been split, and then again, we can see where it goes throughout that workflow. But in this scenario, it's going to split the document for me, and then it's going to forward that document into whatever batch I've specified here. And so it's going to put it in the back-ordered batch. And so that's why I have the back-ordered batch set up over on the left-hand side. So again, this is going to bring up a lot of questions. As you guys have questions, make sure you're putting them into the question box there, and I'll follow up with them at the end. But there are multiple different conditions for splitting or for managing the documents through the workflow. If there's not one here that you need, send us a message. Jump on our website, send us a support case. We'll get them added. They're very easy for us to add. But like I said, there's a whole bunch of them here. I would recommend looking at our documentation, because we should have each one of those outlined on the documentation. Also for the workflow, you have to specify what batch the document is, either in this case going into or coming out of for the workflow to fire. So we can fire either on exit batch or on enter batch. In this case, it's on enter. So whenever a document enters the warehouse batch, I want it to do X. So again, this is that rules-based workflow. I also have one set up. I don't have it enabled. So here's a good example, one below margin. So I can specify any sales document. And so this is where the entire document margin is below 15%. Then I want it to do something different. In this case, I would typically add a management review workflow batch and have the document go into there. I have one for emailing invoices. So I could have it where I send out or transfer my document to an invoice, and then I automatically send out an invoice. And so again, we can specify who we want that invoice to go to, who it's showing that it's coming from, or what email address it's coming from. We can also automate the posting process. So we can use workflow rules that once this document enters a specific batch, automatically post this transaction over to QBO. So again, while the posting process is new and for a lot of people, we can automate that so it's not something, or it's not a process that a user has to get so familiar with or may forget to do. We can automate that with the workflow. And then, so workflow works in not just sales. So we can make workflow work for purchasing, for inventory transactions, for stock counts, for receiving. So there's multiple different places that we use the workflow. A lot of what we see though for our users is that they use workflow on the sales side predominantly. Now purchasing, there's some things that we could do here with like PO approval. If they have to get management approval or certain criteria about the PO, we want to make sure it does something before we actually send it out to our vendor. So again, we can use the purchasing workflow to handle or to manage some of that. So there are other applicable places that we can use that workflow, and we have those set up. Whenever you install a new system, we also default in a very basic workflow out of the box for you. And so you're welcome to look at that. But again, I would highly recommend going to our website, use that Getting Started guide. There's some very detailed videos and documentation there that'll help walk you through understanding what workflow is and how to set that up and really go in depth into setting up that workflow. So we've taken a look now at creating our sales transactions. And again, there's some other things that I'll just briefly hit on. I mentioned that we have inventory transactions. So we have our adjustments. We can do an adjustment in and adjustment out. We can do a site transfer here. Within that site transfer, we can also do bin transfers because again, we do support multiple bins within each site. And then the other big one I want to look at is, or just breeze over very quickly, is the stock count functionality. So again, because we are managing inventory, we want to make sure that users have the ability to count that or do a physical count of that inventory. And so with the stock count, I believe I have one started here. We can add, or we can specify, start a new count sheet. We can specify a location. In this way, in this scenario, I'm only counting one item, but I can specify my location. When I start my count, it takes a snapshot of the current quantity on hand, quantity available. I can then either use our mobile device to scan inventory and capture a quantity counted, or I can manually type in a quantity counted. Once I am done, I can finish this count, and at this point it's going to generate a variance, and based off of that variance, if I can then approve that variance or I can modify the variance. But at that point, if I post my stock count, then that's going to generate inventory adjustments, either an adjustment in or an adjustment out, based off of my physical count compared to the system. So if my physical count is higher, I'm going to get an inventory adjustment in. If my physical count is lower, I'm going to get an inventory adjustment out. So again, once that's done, we also have in our audit trail, I can go look at one that's been posted over here. So any of these historical ones have been posted. And so once we post those transactions in the audit, we can see the inventory transactions that were created, showing and then I can drill in, go find inventory transaction 71. So future, we'll have that linkable. But if I go look at inventory transaction 71, and it is posted as well, so I can uncheck my box to hide posted transactions. But we see that this is generated from stock count number 4, and I can go in and I can see exactly what the result of that count was. In this case, I have 2 in adjustment, or items that were adjusted in for this quantity at this unit cost. So again, I can see all of that. I can tie all of that back to my original stock count and see how that inventory got back into my system, or got into my system to start with. So that is the quick overview, higher level overview of SalesPad Cloud. So again, we're gonna stop here, start answering some of those questions that came in on the question box. Go ahead and post questions. We'll stick around for a little bit to go ahead and answer some of those questions. If you have additional questions outside of this demo, go to our website, post questions on there. We have forums. We have the support department that you can contact that'll be able to answer those questions. If you have potential leads or potential customers that you guys are interacting with, you partners are interacting with, that you think might be a good fit, reach out to us. We have the contact page on the website. You'll be able to get a hold of us. We can help you set up a demo. We can help you set up a trial company. We can work with you to get that information up and going. And then if there's any other specific information, so specifically how we integrate to QuickBooks Online, what data goes over, that information is all on the website. But if you do have more detailed questions, or you want to know why we do something one way, again, make use of that form, make use of the website. We have the contact page there. We'll be glad to answer any questions that you have going forward. So thanks for your time. Go ahead and keep posting those questions, and we'll start responding here right away. So thanks for your time.